Hello everyone, and welcome to Unmute Now, the podcast that raises the volume on whispered conversations in our communities. We're here today to have a conversation that's very important and very pertinent for the time that we're in. We'll be thinking about the volcano that's currently erupting in St Vincent and the Grenadines. My name is Raquel McKee, and I'm very glad that you're here to join us today on Unmute Now. If this is your first time, you are very, very welcome. We are so glad you're joining us. And if you're a regular, thank you for coming back. My co-hosts today are Natasha. Hi, Natasha.
Hiya.
Yolande. Hi, Yolande.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Raquel.
And Angela Ifanaja.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Angela. So, ladies, I bet you're all looking forward to this conversation today. We're all very concerned about what's taking place in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we're just watching, in shock, I suppose, and can hardly believe what's happening. So we're very, very pleased that we can be joined today by Dr. Roseanne Smith, who is a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Hi, how are you?
You're on mute.
Hi, I'm fine, thank you, and hi, everyone.
So good to have you.
Pleased to be here.
Brilliant. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you're connected to disasters in the Caribbean?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying I'm a Vincentian, specifically because we are dealing with the issues that are taking place in St. Vincent. But I'm also a lecturer. I have been living in Jamaica for a number of years, I think over 14 years. I'm a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and I've been lecturing in disaster risk management for about 5 or 6 years. I am also a disaster risk management consultant, so I've worked on a number of projects in relation to the area. So I'm also a practitioner in the field, not just a researcher.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. You're obviously well qualified in more than one ways to come and join us in this conversation, and we're looking forward to all the things that you will be able to clarify for us and to tell us about what is taking place. And I kind of want to start there. What exactly really is happening? Do you want to just start off by just saying, when did this start recently and what's been happening, just in case there's anybody who's missed it?
Well, the Soufriere volcano has been erupting effusively from about December, but I think we were living well with that. I think the issue started with the explosive eruption that took place on the 9th of April, and that has been very devastating, very, very overwhelming for the persons living there, and even for us in the diaspora, because we have families there, and besides that, we are Vincentians. So to see what is taking place in the island is very heart-rending, and it's hard for the people. Many persons are in shelters, but we are right now, I am seeing statuses where people are saying this is like a one zone, because we had it zoned according to the risk level. But everyone is being impacted now, and it's extremely terrible. There is no way of buttering this up to say, well, it's just, it's disaster in and of itself. And what makes it worse is that we were going through a COVID pandemic. We are still going through that. We were experiencing dengue outbreak, and so we had that, which have affected the economy, and so that just added onto a lot of other issues, things that we call in the field of disaster risk as multiple stresses, multiple hazards. So it's a really difficult time for the country at this moment.
Sorry, Doctor, I'd like to just ask you, just for my understanding, and I wonder whether anybody else listening would also have the same question. You said it had been erupting since December, but that we've been managing that. What does that mean? Because I think for me anyway, when I hear of eruption, I think it's huge, it's big, as what we're seeing now. But you're saying this had started in December and it had been managing. So what are the stages? What does that mean?
Well, December, they had what is called an effusive volcanic eruption. And in very layman's term, it really was more like a building of a dome. That is what we were monitoring. We were seeing that the volcano was having some activity where there was a dome that was building adjacent to the other dome. So I said we can live with it because it wasn't anything that was affecting us. It was just happening within the crater. So, and I do not want to get very technical because that was one of the issues we had when we were listening to a lot of what was happening. The whole idea of risk communication, and persons were really not understanding scientific and technical terms. So I said everything was, whatever risk would have been within the crater itself, right? So, you know, when we started smelling sulfur, you would have to be that close to it to be affected. So it wasn't affecting persons. But then on the 9th, it would have been like if whatever was inside, whatever pressure was building up, exploded, you know? So it's like when you are angry and you're not saying anything, but you know, you're still angry, and then you get really angry and you just explode and start cussing out everybody. So it's like that sort of behavior for the volcano. So I said the risk then would have been tremendous. We would have had the evacuation order to remove those persons in the high risk zone, the red, the orange, and also even the yellow zone, to what we would have deemed the safe zone, which was the green zone.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I may just jump in, I'm sitting here waiting to acknowledge the fact that I'm born Vincentian. I'm happy to share the experiences, just to add to what Dr. Smith has said, the experiences that my own family members have reported, and it's nothing different to what Dr. Jasmine Smith has said. Well, I call her Jasmine Roseanne. And really, for me, what's concerning is what Dr. Smith alluded to, the fact that we're now in one zone, where even for my parents, my dad who lives in a green zone, the impact there right now, to me, there ain't no difference. There ain't no red, yellow, or orange zone. And I'm going to throw this in the mix. Simply because I know that there would have been a lot of conspiracy theories, and I'm glad to hear that we're avoiding technical terms, because I realize that the lead scientist has dispelled one of the theories that it was geothermal drilling that
caused it,
made the volcano very angry. So he's dispelled that. But it seems to be a lot has compounded it, Dr. Smith, because now we have flooding, which is another of the added outcomes of this volcanic eruption.
Yes.
So it is dire.
Yeah, because these things are expected in a way when it comes to volcano, because here we had a lot of ash, and the ash was affecting everybody. And one of the ways we wanted the ash, you know, to help remove the ash was to get a little rain, you know. We got more than we prayed for, I suppose. In some areas, they got more rain. And what follows with rain and ash and mud and all these things mixed up together is what they call lahars. So we had these almost like mud flows going down valleys and riverbanks and river areas, and you know, then we had flooding in the city area, more so because we are in the period of also, you know, responding, and while they are doing a lot, it takes a lot of manpower to remove all these ash. So drains would have been blocked from the ash, and so it resulted in even more flooding than we normally get in these areas. So, you know, I know that even then persons were casting blame, but because I'm also in the field, I had to be looking at it from different angles. And one of the things that affect us is really resources, you know, human resources, and where there's a lack, you know, we will obviously be constrained to do as much as we would want to do in a short period of time.
Natasha, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dr. Smith, I'm aware that you have a large following, I guess primarily because of what you do. And unfortunately, the Caribbean is known as a region that primarily the natural disaster that strikes many of us is hurricanes. But we do know a lot of our fellow islands have, you know, volcanoes, whether they're active or inactive. Due to your following and probably, you know, a lot of people knowing about your presence back on the island, what are some of the things that you're hearing from the people who are still on the ground in terms of what the situation is actually like there, be it shelter, food, water, alluding to what you were just saying about certain things becoming affected by the ash flow and things like that?
Well, there is a lot of issues, and one of the things is we have to sift through these issues very carefully. There are issues in relation to coordination efforts, and from the beginning, when the evacuation order was issued, there was, and just before, there was the whole reopening of schools, right? And so the issue, one of the issues that came up was whether the schools themselves were ready, shelter ready for a volcanic eruption, because when that order was issued, it means that somebody would have been there to remove desks and to prepare this room, and that in itself might have thwarted the process of getting persons into the schools timely, so that this discussion came out. And then there was a discussion that we didn't have a lot of things on the ground in relation to food and just coordinating those efforts. So what we capitalized on, and what was really good to see coming out, something that I advocate a lot for, was that strong social capital. And it is that social capital in a way that came to the rescue of Vincentians. A lot of persons who volunteer were not officially volunteers. A lot of cooks were not officially cooks. They came and they entered the shelter and they did a lot of things. But even then, there was an issue in terms of the shelter, some getting better food than some not getting, the right food. Those were some of the comments coming out. Some people feel that the food did not cater to the health needs of the persons, whether they are diabetic or hypertensive. And I saw articles coming through social media after a while, and not just articles, but little bulletins, meaning that things were being addressed, but the issue I had was its timing. It appears reactive. And you do not want to say that this is not being done or this was not done, because clearly there would have been some plans. I think the director of NEMO came and said, certain ministries have portfolio. And so when they did not do what they're supposed to do, persons blame NEMO, and NEMO should not be taking all the blame for it. And so, the whole issue of who, what to do what and when would have been coming out. And because the island also is very politically divided, I said you have to be very, very careful and very objective, not to go down the route of politics in really assessing what was on the ground, what was happening on the ground. So as somebody in the field, I was listening, and yes, I am very vocal. So if I believe somebody need little licks, I will say it with my, I will say it with my words, that I don't think this was done properly. But at the same time, I have to be careful to say, is it that the plan was there, but there were gaps in the plan? And this situation provide a lot of opportunity for us as disaster risk practitioners and people in the field on the ground to really assess our weaknesses and going forward to capitalize on many of these weaknesses. So yes, there were issues, coordination, and also another one is distribution, which is still happening right now. And right now it's a big hot topic on Facebook, given the public health act and the enforcement of that act right now. There is also this, whether it was always there, it was enforced before, why is it now that we are hearing about it? How is it going to affect, distribution right now?
What exactly is the issue with the distribution? I wonder.
Just before you ask the question, Raquel, may I just pick up clarification for the sake of the viewers? NEMO, that term NEMO, that would be our, I'm not clear on the acronym exactly.
National Emergency Management Organization. It's our disaster organization in St. Vincent, just like we have one in Jamaica, and each of the Caribbean island has their own.
And before I let Dr. Smith explain your question, Raquel, in terms of context as well, adding to the areas on the ground, I know our water supply has been significantly impacted, and that is to be expected in terms of the ashfall. So there is food security issue. I'm sure Dr. Smith would elaborate on that. Then, as far as I'm concerned, there is isolation in some areas. So there's a whole lot of issues.
Yeah, and we can also add to that in terms of the psychosocial impact of the situation. Now, psychosocial impact is something that is very understudied in the disaster risk management field within the Caribbean. And you know how we feel about mental health and how we treat mental health already. And now this is a situation that grieves me, particularly because I said it before, I know who I am. And to move from my comfortable home into a shelter mixed with persons, I don't think I could last 2 days. And we have to see that again. We have counselors on the ground, but the overwhelming issue is that do we have enough counselors? You know, how is that going? So the psychosocial, I've seen persons saying that they are depressed. They are ready to go back home, but go back to where?
What?
And when?
Yeah.
You know, so we have that. And as the issue with the water, you know, that Yolan highlighted, it was very critical because again, it speaks to moving forward. Should we have something where each house have a tank? In Jamaica, you know, that is something that we see a lot coming
That's
out.
common, yes.
Their tanks on their house and so on. But then it also speak about what was in place before, because we was persons were actually, I myself tell persons to store up water. But then I realized that because they have only gone through hurricane, you know,
I don't understand the extent.
Right, the extent is like it wasn't getting through to them that this was more than a day of water with you know, a drum or jugs that you really need. But again, it was an opportunity because we find springs that we didn't know existed. You know, many of us realize that there were a lot of springs, and that is something I'm hoping to get a couple of my past students back home to actually map these minor springs, because CWSA, which is the Central Water Sewage Authority, they are aware of the major springs, but we are seeing that we have a lot of minor springs that came to the rescue of our population.
So how would the minor springs be the rescue? Would they not have been contaminated as well by the ash?
These are underground springs, right? Okay. So they are not as open to be affected by the ash. So a lot of persons use them. Obviously, the water will have to be boiled as any water that you get. But it was really good to see that a lot of persons used that until the water came back. Electricity was affected at one point in time, and then you just have to imagine being in your home, having to cover any little space that could let ash in. That's additional heat, and then your fan not working, and there are persons with young babies, just, you know, they're pregnant persons. But when I said it's grieving and overwhelming, I have to speak like that because sometimes we cannot appreciate something unless we ourselves go through it, right? And so I really would like the world to know that this is not just a hurricane that we know after a day we are back, you know, or we are getting, you know, because we have a lot of information on hurricane, and we have gone through it so much, you can say that we are a little bit better in managing and dealing with that. When it comes to volcanic eruptions, we are still learning, and we are still seeing where we are at in terms of, you know, addressing the issues surrounding volcanic eruptions.
Simply because I interrupted Raquel, I owe it to you, Raquel, to take you back to your question about distribution.
That's what I was just gonna
Sorry, Natasha.
Yes, I was asking, you know, what are the issues with the distribution? Is it that, because I mean, when you said distribution issues, my first thought was, oh, they can't reach the people, but then at the same time, they're not in the red zone anymore. So, you know, what are the issues with the distribution?
Okay, so one of the things one of the things that you want to be able to do, and I said to be able to do because it's very difficult, is to be able to coordinate resources, and persons dealing with resources. So we have NEMO operating as a central place where they take these resources in, and then they need to get it out to the right people. Right? Now, I said already, the political atmosphere in St. Vincent is an issue because we had complaints coming out on social media, whether or not they are true or not. These are things that we normally hear coming out in other countries in relation to disaster and disaster response. Hence the reason why I will mention them, where some persons are giving resources to persons who support their party and not others. So there was somewhat of an unfair allocation. In other cases, we have persons not only in the shelters, but also in the private home. There are families who take on persons in the private home. And while you do that, you will not have enough resources to cater to the needs. So we also need those persons to get resources. And I know that NEMO would have advised that they call and register, but then there was an issue. There was not enough persons manning the telephone. People could not get in contact with NEMO, so that even compounded the problem. And then after they call and register, they might get food one time and then they have to wait, or they don't know if they are going to get another in another period, or, So, these are some of the issues associated with distribution and allocation, fair allocation of the resources. And obviously it would have been affected again by human resources to assist with getting these resources out. One of the things I also want to highlight is that there was a case when we had the water crisis where I think it was a vehicle chucking water, and then people, it's like they bomb rush it in a way and they try to get off. I even see an article where they actually the police held a gentleman to say that he stole water, and he was saying, well, his mother home and he wants the water, he wanted it. And these are issues that I've seen. Even I think it was a UN course I did, and they mentioned that when they give somebody the resources to deliver somewhere, do not stop. Do not stop, even if you see persons on the road that are needy and in need. Do not stop, because when you stop, it creates conflict. You can be rushed and you are not manned and powered to deal with that. So wherever the resource is supposed to go, you're actually supposed to take it there. And from there, resources should be distributed, right? And one of the other issues, you do not want duplication of efforts. So there's a lot of things in terms of coordinating, and that is critical at this time, because you don't want to send resources to Yolan's home and then I didn't know, and I take the same set of resources because I want Yolan is my friend and I want to help Yolan. So it's very difficult, and I appreciate the challenge of the process for NEMO. Not that I'm saying they get everything right. I clearly believe that there was some breakdown somewhere in the planning, in the coordination prior to the event taking place. But I can appreciate the challenges that they are experiencing right now, because even if I was in that position, I would be faced with the same challenge unless I have all the resources in the world.
Okay, Angela, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I wonder whether I may ask maybe two questions in one. And the first is in relation to the response of the international community right now. What is your assessment of the way that this has been, so has enough volume been raised on this? How do you assess the way that the international community has responded to this disaster? That's my first one. And the second thing is, what does the international community really need to focus on now? Like, how can we be the most help right now? I'm conscious that people are doing things, there's aid being sent, people are sort of doing fundraisers and sending money, and we're all contributing to things and all that sort of stuff. But there is obviously the issue of coordination, as you've said. What can we best do right now? And also just your sense of how it has been handled so far in the international community.
Okay, so I'll address that based on my own knowledge and not the lack of, because clearly there might have been things taking place, and because I'm not on the ground and not I would not be able to address all. Coming through what I've been reading, I know that they have assisted well in terms of financial contributions. And, this is something that we appreciate. I would say the more the merrier. If we get more, it's better for us, in that, we need to rebuild, but we cannot rebuild the same way. And one of the issues with rebuilding is oftentimes we rebuild to bring back normalcy and not for transformation. And what we need is transformation. We need reconstruction. And what if we are rebuilding stronger and better and to take in disaster risk mitigation, we are going to need a lot of finance. But then there is also an issue, and this is probably very touchy, because I do not know the extent to which international agencies can get involved in what is in governance, because they will do their part and they will expect good governance to prevail and the government to do their part. I don't think they can get themselves mixed up in that. I'm not sure about that. But there is an issue there with all the resources coming in terms of accountability and transparency. And that is another thing that has been blowing as a horn on social media, on Facebook, where persons are saying, will the resources be used for the persons in the right way, for those sectors or private businesses, or how will it be used? How will it be distributed? How will it be allocated across these agencies? And for what? And how do we monitor these as we go forward? And clearly, again, I have to be so careful, because you don't want to be political in this, but I said vocally, I said it out, that that is the reason why we have opposition in government, to ensure that they do their part, because they are supposed to be the eyes and the ears of the persons. And clearly, I had discussion where persons are saying they have been calling for that for years, and it has not been happening. So we need some sort of, I don't know if it's a case where they can give and say, well, we need to see how this money is being spent. We need to be reported to, so they might not be directly involved in allocation, but then they need, I don't know if that normally takes place or will happen. Other persons have called for resources instead of finance, to say, well, give us building material from the international community. Then we know that building material, there's more corruption surrounding money than it's around. Yeah. But then I have seen situation, even following Thomas, where I did my own research, where we had Hurricane Thomas, that is, where resources came in. And while I was doing my PhD research at that time, so that is a good bit of years ago, and persons were saying who was supposed to get the material, never get it, and who supposed to get, and they were taking me to homes that didn't warrant untouched and showing me materials on the person's house and all these things. So it goes very deeper in terms of the root cause. The root cause is at a level where we are saying who is responsible for distribution, and how can we, after doing this damage assessment and needs assessment, look on the document and said, well, Jack is the most vulnerable and he got exactly what he's supposed, and we can prove that Jack get before everybody else because he was among the most vulnerable. Who is going to be, be the persons overseeing that process and ensuring that they are not affected by any government minister who might call and say, you know what, send something down to Jamie for me, because at the end, Jamie might be on the list, but he might be number 10 and he's supposed to wait until we are at number 10. So we really need a system that works, and a system that works for the people and is not affected by political affiliation. International community, I don't know the extent to which they get involved and can get involved in this process, but these are some things that have been pitching out, and if there's any way for them to monitor and evaluate and assist it with that I think that would be where we need that sort of independent person to really, who is not affiliated with any politics whatsoever in St. Vincent, to really man the process. But, we are a Caribbean and we have seen these things happen throughout the Caribbean islands. So it's not unique to St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
It's not even unique to the Caribbean. It's all throughout the world.
Right.
And you wanted to jump in.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to say, when it comes to the international community on the lower level, in terms of those of us who have families back home and we live in international countries, I suppose for us, the next best thing is to pack the barrels and the boxes and send them home. But very recently, at least 2 days ago, I know you alluded to this, Dr. Smith, but didn't get into it. 2 days ago, the Prime Minister announced that there will be seizures of items coming through the customs that are tin products, and they're going to be seized under the Public Health Act for inspection. Now, I know there's been a lot of noise about that on social media. What does inspection entail? Is it going to be opening tin products? Because if you open them, it can't be used again. And when these products come out of international communities, we're assuming that we've already, or these products have already been through the relevant health checks within a system that is potentially superior to the one that is in, small islands as we so to me, this is going to delay the whole distribution process again perhaps unnecessarily or perhaps necessarily, we don't know, but it is something that a lot of people are now shouting about on social media as well.
Yes, yes, there have been a lot of shout on that, and I myself have been trying to make a lot of sense in terms of what is being said. I know the Prime Minister said that it's not seizure, it's really just enforcing the public health law, and I am all for that. To be honest, we have too many things happening already. We have disaster. We don't want a disaster upon a disaster to say that persons who send this food, they expire, and then they eat those food, and we end up, because we know our healthcare system is already overwhelmed, and it wasn't good before. This is not news to anybody. We know we had some issues there. So I am for that. I think where I had a challenge, and still do, is the timing of it, right? It's the timing of it, because this is something that should have been implemented prior to anything being, because persons were sending barrels. In fact, we decided that we were going $25 per barrel, and that should have been mentioned. But when you're packing the barrel, please ensure that you fill out these requisite forms or so on. Now, I do not have all the answers, because again, this is what has been coming through social media, because I'm hearing divergent views in that it's only for the containers and things for the supermarkets, and this has been going on and always, and not specifically for the barrels. But then in listening to the clip, I heard persons and not supermarkets or businesses. I heard persons. So we have to look at it from a situation of confusion rather than politics, to say there is a breakdown in communication somewhere. There is some issue in terms of persons' clarity on what the Public Health Act entails and who is it for. So we need to clear that, and we need to clear whether is it seizure, is it a case that they are going to inspect? Are you going to get it back if all is well? How does will this affect distribution? How will it slow down the process? Do you have a time frame in terms of when? Because we already don't have resources. We already don't have the human. We were complaining. The Prime Minister was saying, please send money instead of barrels, because so persons obviously is adding to that, and they are saying it seemed to them that it's possible that in order to prevent more barrels from coming in, they enforce this act, to say send money instead. No, we don't know. And I can't read the PM's mind, So I am saying, instead of me having all these questions and the public having all these questions without answers, come, not the PM, because I know our Prime Minister like to be at the face and the front of everything, but somebody has been charged with this portfolio, and that is the person, given the mistrust and the distrust or whatever trust we have with transparency and accountability, that has already clouded the atmosphere when it comes to the PM. Then his voice should not be the one we are hearing. We should hear the person who is responsible for that portfolio come to the public, address the questions, because this division where persons are warring with each other, trying to understand, that is not what this is what it means. Let us just clarify it and put a stop to that by coming forward and saying, this is what, and this is why we are enforcing it now. Possibly somebody got sick and we say, all right, we were kind of, so let us enforce. Whatever the reason, come to the forefront and address the people, so that we are not divided among ourselves, but we are focused on who we should be focused, the persons who make the decisions and can create the change.
Brilliant. We kind of want to move towards the end now, so I'm going to turn to Natasha.
Yes, I was just about to say, before Raquel changes the conversation, but I'm interested, Dr. Smith. I've heard over the news that, and I've read a few articles that says La Soufriere might actually continue erupting for at least another year, or at least down until September.
God forbid it.
Yes,
Amen.
we
God
forbid that in the name of
Definitely
Jesus.
do not want that.
Right? But I mean, we don't know, or I don't know if it means like small eruptions, little burps, or they're talking about full pyroclastic flows. See, I learned something.
Come
Full
on.
pyroclastic flows. But do you think how do you think that the country and the people there might be able to sustain living, considering now that we're being told that it's not just the red zone, but people are feeling effects in the so-called safe zones and the green zones? Do you think that St. Vincent and its people could sustain repeated eruptions for at least another year, considering you can't really rebuild if stuff is still ongoing.
If it's still happening.
I might be asking you too much, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
My thoughts
brief,
from the very beginning, I said we are on a long road to recovery. This is not, and that is why I'm saying I'm hopeful, because sometimes at the beginning, persons feel and they cause, and we are seeing conflict already. But this is just the beginning. You know, it's down the road. Remember, we were already poor. You know, I can say it publicly now because the Prime Minister admits that it's extreme poverty. But the poverty assessment report would have already shown that those high-risk areas, particularly those on the northeastern side, were among the most vulnerable and the poorest in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, persons going into those areas are saying there's nothing there. Agriculture was the main livelihood there. The one arrowroot industry that is dear to my heart, and that we had as a a reflection of what was in the past, our glory in the past in relation to arrowroot, was destroyed. Churches were destroyed. So and then with this, we have to listen to the scientists because they are the ones who are monitoring it. So my advice would be, before we even think about going back, to hear what the scientists are saying. You know, yes, there's a possibility of it erupting, but to what extent? And I know they mentioned that it might be lahars and so on, and that in itself is very dangerous. When do we go back? You know, I don't think anyone can say that outrightly, because we have to listen to them as they monitor. But then what
when
are
you
they
say
going
go
back
back
to?
you mean go back to their homes in the red
Go back
zone?
to their homes. Some will have no homes to go back to, obviously, and will have to remain in shelter or whatever system they put in place. But for those who really want to go back and who are not in civil service or something, those who are farmers, ash has overtaken the land, you know, and so it's really difficult to say. You know, I personally will say, you know, let us not move as yet. You know, let us wait and let us listen to the scientists to hear. But it's very hard to say what they are going, because we're going to have high unemployment, because self-employment would have been, you know, what those persons there would have been heavily dependent. They don't have any employment now if their farms are destroyed. How do we provide for them? Is there any social protection system? You know, we had the love box, I think prior to election or during election, that we say we are assisting, and it was COVID, like almost like for COVID. What will we put in place, and for how long? How long can we sustain whatever social protection system? If we say we are going to give them 500 ISI a month, can we do that for a year? Right? What system? So I think we have to think now, if we are going to do some social protection system, if we are going to allocate land in the green zone, which might not have been affected, for them to use this land until, you know, we have to think about what systems we are going to put in place now for these people. We can't just, I mean, they have, it's the indigenous Caribs, I should mention, for the northeastern. It's our Garifuna people who live in those areas, and for years we have mentioned how marginalized they have been, and how, you know, a lot has not been done for them, and now they need us even more.
Even worse,
you know,
now.
even more so. So I really would want to see some sort of, I guess, something in writing to say this is how we are going to approach it in the medium, or the short term, the medium term, and the long term, to really bring these people out of their situation and transform them into to how we normally look at them on National Heroes Day, when we parade and so on, and we big up, you know, our Chief Chatterjee. I would really want to see a little bit more emphasis put in rebuilding their lives and making them feel as if, yes, we have a plan for them moving forward.
And moving forward is exactly the point that I want to wrap up on, because we're actually out of time. But I'm just thinking about how can we help St. Vincent and the Grenadines to move forward. You know, when around about the 9th of April, when things were in the height and in the heat, people came forward and donated food items. People came forward and donated in cash. I'm going to ask both Yolande and yourself, Roseanne, Dr. Smith, to tell us, where can we donate? And, you know, how can we help? What are the things that probably are most needed at this time?
Well, for me, that is a question that Nemo will have to answer, because I know that there are official accounts that I know I have them. I don't have them with me. Probably I can share them after for you to put as a link.
We'll add them.
Yeah, so we have the official accounts that you can actually donate financially to that. And I know persons will, I will say, where you can adopt, a family or a group, NGO or something. You can probably reach out to an NGO and say, I want to work through you, because I know some persons have issue working through the government, because again, for the same transparency, accountability issue, and they prefer work through a church or work through an NGO. One of the things personally, and I said this before, we don't have enough counselors on the ground, and we have a lot in the diaspora. And it will be nice, because right now, even with COVID, we realize this technology-wise, we are going. So it will be nice if we can have that sort of support, psychosocial support, coming through different channels where we are lacking on the ground, because I don't see us just offering finance or offering food. I also want to see, we have an issue with that, if we can provide that resources. We had an issue prior with risk communication, and I'm saying, if you're abroad and you are very good at that, maybe you can start seeing how you can pull this information together to design something to help us communicate our information better to our people, because this is not the end. The volcano is not going back to sleep, or it's not dying, it's going to sleep. It will still be active, and we don't know when it will erupt again. And sometimes we have a very short memory, today we remember, and next week we forget what the impact. And I have mentioned that I believe we have to start mainstreaming disaster risk management into this educational system in schools. And so if you can develop resources that can really support the education sector in that, for me, that is again something that persons might not be seen. They might not view it as, oh, this is not a need, but it's a priority nevertheless, because we have to move forward. We have to rebuild better, and we have to look at the gaps and say how we can address the gaps. We don't have the finance to hire consultants all the time. Even at home, I always believe in hiring local consultants, not just because we are cheaper, we know our context, right? But oftentimes we see that, for some of these countries, they hire consultants coming from, abroad, and I don't know if their resume looks better or they feel better hiring them. But at times, they are not on the ground, and they are not aware of our local context. They don't know our language. We have to start seeing what we can do with the information that we are gathering to help us to rebuild. We might have engineers who might say, look, you need to address your roads this way or something. This is how I see moving forward and working together, not just in terms of the finance and the food, but our human resources.
Yolande, can I just ask you to share at least one way that people can give?
Well, I mean, I would, in a similar way as to what Dr. Smith has said, yes, we know that there are accounts that we will share in at the bottom. Natasha is good at saying where it is. In the information section, we will share those accounts, but I really want to echo the sentiments that for me, it's similar to Dr. Smith. It's really not about what you can give financially. We need that. I want to say that I know that there are calls for the international community to consider whether or not there could now be avenues to take in people from St. Vincent. I know we're probably not going to be refugees or asylum seekers, but there must be context, I suppose, a discussion for the international community to look at whether or not that there is an opening there to take people in as migrants under the current circumstances. And I know that there is at least one friend of mine in St. Vincent who's very concerned about the loss to the education of our nation's children. And she would like to advocate perhaps for sponsorship from companies, whether to sponsor online classes in terms of a product that she herself is looking to build and market to reach children in their homes. But again, that will be another problem if internet access becomes a difficulty given where some people might be displaced.
Yeah.
So it is quite a lot. And really, again, as Dr. Smith says, it is so much in terms of the resources in people that we're looking for more than just financial donation.
Yes. Very good points. Educators, engineers, entrepreneurs, 3 E's, and anybody else. Sorry?
Counselors.
Counselors, you have been called. You have been called to action. I'm going to be coming back to Dr. Smith to ask, is there anything that you want us to raise the volume on? But I can see Natasha's itching there.
Yes, I was going to say that to follow up in terms of the donation, because as a former Caribbean media person, it would be remiss of me to sit here and say that not just the international community, but the Caribbean community has also stepped up, because I know, and I've read of at least 3 islands who have offered to, take some St. Vincents who are, who want to move to the countries as well and provide them a place to live. So there's that. And for people who are looking to contribute, like financially, I know that there are a few Caribbean countries who persons from there can just check their local social media. I know Barbados, Antigua, Trinidad, and did I say Barbados? And
Yes,
St. Lucia, have their local people on the ground who are taking funds, and it's all legitimate and things like that. The links are there. If you're from those countries or not, go on social media, you'll find that. If you live in the US, there's a place in Miami and in New York that are doing the barrels and the food stuffs and things like that. Miami and New York. In Toronto, people are doing it. In the UK, there is a link that I have that I'll put in the YouTube description, that they are accepting food stuff and money in London, and they have dates where they're shipping stuff down. So we'll provide all that information in the link. For the people who are listening, I will give you the YouTube link as well to our channel, and you can go there and find those links, or on our social medias. That's it.
Fantastic.
And before Dr. Smith raises the volume, I would have to say, I'm very pleased to see the announcement that Rihanna, Sean Paul, Nicki Minaj, and Buju Banton will be in concert on the 23rd of May to raise funds for our beautiful little island. And if you're out there and you're a celebrity, we're also asking you to use your
power,
whatever it is that will help.
Yes, that is fantastic. And I mean, we've had so much that we have talked about, and so much that we haven't even started to touch on. For instance, we haven't talked about the impact it's having on neighboring countries. We haven't talked about the impact it will have when, when people take refuge in these other countries, and how we're going to support people to rebuild their lives in a new location and, continuing to maintain their identity. There's so much more that we could address. And we just call on everybody listening, everybody watching. What can you do? What can you do? Who do you know? Who can you invite into this situation to get them to do something to make a difference to so many people who have been displaced in this disaster? Dr. Smith, what would you like to raise the volume on?
First, I want to say, thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this. I think it's very helpful, useful. It will, really get the information out. We are grateful for all the international and regional support that we have been getting, and also the local efforts of our own Vincentians who took the initiative to really help their neighbor. And in raising the volume, that is, I want to deal with that latter point. That is who we are as Vincentians. And over the years, I've seen that sort of, if I call it camaraderie and that sort of love and care for each other being, destroyed by political affiliation and political division. And it will be good for us to remember who we are. And so if I have to raise the volume, I will say, let us forget about politics and political affiliation, and let us focus on our island and who we are as a people moving forward. Because and I've said this many, many times, government's supposed to fear the people. The power is always in the person's hand. We can get our accountability, we can get transparency, we can get all the things that we are demanding if we are together. If we are divided, we will be conquered. But if we are together, it doesn't matter who gets in power. When they get in power, they will always remember that their purpose is for the people. So raising the volume, forget about political affiliation and put country over party any day.
Well said.
Brilliant, brilliant. So listeners and viewers, we have spoken with a professional, Dr. Smith, who has talked to us a little bit about the intricacies about what's taking place with La Soufriere in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we wanted to get a little bit of input from the Consul General, and we have him here with us. Welcome, Dr. Chris Stange. We're so pleased that you could join us.
Thank you.
So we have a few questions just to ask you. You know, as we've been thinking about what's happening with the volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we're just wondering what the rationale is for the government asking for those people who want to help to send money rather than shipments of items.
Okay. Well, if you wouldn't mind me just a minute again, first of all, thank you so much for this engagement. Right now, I'd like to frame it just a little bit more is that, you know, we have basically a fifth of our population, 20,000 people that have had to been displaced because of the activity and the eruption of the volcano. And so obviously they've had to be moved away from what we deem as the red and the orange zone into the yellow and especially into the green zone. But we're having to do that amongst a small country. St. Vincent is our largest island, but it's only 18 miles by 11 miles. So you're having to cram all these people. But most importantly, these are actually our indigenous people, but they're also predominantly our farming community. And as everyone knows in the Caribbean, the two largest earners in our economy are tourism and agriculture. So you're having to move all these people and displace them, but you're having to do it amongst obviously the global pandemic of COVID. And then on top of that, we had Hurricane Thomas that we haven't fully recovered from. And then in less than a month's time, we start our tropical storm season. So you can't actually, you know, ask for the, you know, what is really happening right now is this is all being framed amongst, you know, a very, very difficult thing. We have a natural disaster, but we also have a natural disaster that's completely right now is just into the humanitarian zone and keeping these people fed 3 square meals a day, getting clean water. And since the beginning from April 9th, you know, we've had 32 different eruptions. And until the actual scientists and the experts deem that the actual volcano is completely inactive and dormant, these people cannot return back to their homelands. So it's going to be an ongoing thing. And do we know for how long? No, we don't know. It's a fluid situation. Now, the most interesting part is that there was, I think, just under 700 people that registered that they might have an interest in leaving St. Vincent and going to the neighboring islands. So because we're part of the OECS, we already have a freedom of movement where our nationals can freely go to these islands. So, but again, from that, there's been very, very few people that have actually picked that up because people want to stay at home. People want to be involved. People obviously don't want to leave their properties. They want to get back to them at the earliest time possible. So right now, again, the vast majority of everyone is still in St. Vincent.
I'm happy to note, or for us to note, that our country is the only country in Northern Ireland that has a consulate representative. And so Chris has done a lot of good work representing not only the Vincentian community, but the Caribbean community on a whole. So I want to take you back to the direct question, Chris. And that question was, why has the government explicitly asked for donations of shipment of items as opposed to money? Can you just give us the rationale behind that?
Shipment of items over money, or shipment of or
sorry, money over shipment of items. Both. Sorry, thank you, Rochelle.
Yep. There's actually two things. So again, I wanted to frame that first, and again, I want to address your question directly now. So what happens is initially when there's a humanitarian effort like this, we need all hands on deck. So that's obviously government agencies. Everything kicks in. We look at international assistance. We look at our regional partners. We look at the NGOs that are on the ground, for example, like, you know, the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, the Red Cross, the different parishes, etc. So yes, part of that is obviously going to be donation driven because we're going to need aid. We don't have a surplus of things on the ground. But the difficulty with that, and what I would like to articulate to the community, is that it takes time to ship these items. So when we have a humanitarian crisis, we would have things on the ground or actually regionally at our neighbors, etc. So what happens is, for example, like water was the big issue in the beginning because all the ash that had spewed out had contaminated all our spring water. So although our actual water board, the CWSA, has done its best and has actually, filtered the water, and now it's actually safe for human consumption, the difficulty in the beginning, as long as there's ash being spewed, we are going to have an actual shortage of water, and we need to have that. And yes, we have stuff on there. We were able to use the cruise ships because they have desalination facilities on board where they can actually take seawater and actually rejuvenate that to actually drinking water. We've had a lot of actually international support from all the various countries that have brought water in. And there is actually drives on there. The difficulty with it is that it's getting that actual items to where it needs to get. Now we're at the stage now where there's been so much support and stuff that's been done by associations, by individuals. The government put a duty-free concession on anything that was shipped across, and asking people to label it appropriately so it could end up in the right ports or for distribution. And there's still a lot of stuff to come that, over the next month to 6 weeks. Because again, because of the transport right now, it's being done on vessels or shipping. It's going to take some time. But the difficulty with it is that, a lot of these items actually can be bought in the actual area, and that money can go so much more further. So for example, if I was to take an example, say someone came in here and the phones rang off the hook. We've been inundated with the support and stuff from nationals, not just within Northern Ireland and Ireland, but further stream, from around the world, people have actually called. And one of the things that happens is that, say someone wants to give a physical donation. Well, if I have an entire container load of water to ship, we can work with that, okay? We can do something with that. But if someone wants to give, for example, an individual case of water and say that monetarily wise is, say, £5, it would be much better to actually have £5 in a donation that could actually go there immediately, be wired and be transferred, then it could cost 10 to 15 times to ship that £5 case of water. So that's the actual context that we're actually talking in. Because right now, we really have two pillars of basically disaster. Anyone that deals within disaster recovery, and that's part of the overseas missions and through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is that the first stage here is humanitarian only. It's to get these people safe. It's to get them, fed and watered. It's to make sure that, all the basic provisions are put in there. And then it's only until the activity has stopped that we can even begin to actually address a post-recovery effort. So, yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. And again, with regards to the donations, I also need to make this very, very clear is that unfortunately, as an overseas mission, and again, as Yolande said, is that, we are the only Caribbean country that has a mission outside of London. Now, all the missions in London cover the entire United Kingdom. So, we're honored to be in this position, and we work with, all the Caribbean countries, and we're lovely to have a presence here, and especially being in Northern Ireland and its relationship with Ireland. But when you look at the funding and stuff that's set up, we ask people to ensure that if they're sending their hard-earned money, that it actually goes to a bona fide resource. So, for example, all the overseas missions have the authority of the government to raise funds, and 100% of that fund is traceable. So as a civil servant, this basically goes into basically the general account that's set up for disaster management. And that basically goes through our government agencies. The Prime Minister, does not have the actual, thing to decide where that goes. So it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with getting money on the ground for all those people to actually, who need it. It's humanitarian. It's just a general fund. And some partners, for example, what they've done is rather than actually put money into the account, they've actually done it with the actual organizations on the ground. So, for example, the Irish government and the UK government, rather than put money into a fund, they might actually allocate supplies, but those supplies would be actually seconded directly, say, to the Red Cross on the ground. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. The difficulty that I have is that I see all these GoFunds that have actually been set up in all these different agencies. And again, the problem that we have is that we have no way to actually verify, are these legitimate actually funding sources? Are these going to get to the actual people that need it on the ground? And what we're also very aware of is that we're raising money on behalf of a country. So really at the end of the day, you need the government's authority to be able to do this, because we have no way as a government, if something goes wrong or this money goes astray, we can't put our actual name behind that. So what I do is ask people to make sure that they know where that fund is actually attached to. If it's attached to an overseas mission, like a consulate, an embassy, a high commission, guaranteed 100% of that money is going to be transferred. There'll be a complete audit and paper trail. We give receipts, we give whatever's needed, versus other types of funding sources. We have no way to know where that's actually doing. So that's what happens, is that we want it to be a legitimate funding. People work hard enough. We have to have confidence in the system from basically funding source that it's getting to the people on the ground.
I'm so glad that you clarified that, because there were a number of different ways to view that. At the same time, I'm fully aware that there are some people who want to give relationally. They want to give to the people that they know and the people they're connected to. And so I can understand why some people might set up GoFundMes, because people are coming at them with money and they need to have somewhere to put this money so that it will go directly. And I'm sure that the ones connected to Unmute Now will be ensuring that it goes directly to where the need is.
Yes. And Raquel, if you don't mind me intervening, I agree with you. Is if someone, for example, wants to send money to a family member or other types of things, they're free to do that. They can do what they want with that. But the difficulty that we have is that if you actually are proposing or under the banner that you're raising money for St. Vincent the Grenadines, that by default actually means that you're raising funds for the government. And if you're actually funding stuff there, you see the problem that we have. Yes, you're actually getting a very mixed message there. Yeah. And again, if people want to send stuff, so for example, I've had nationals say to me, I have a barrel here, I want to send it. There's a duty-free concession there, but I want it to go to this family. And I'm sorry, we can't choose, because we have to be impartial. We have to be transparent, and our funding efforts are not for individual families. Our is for everyone equally and transparent. Okay. So again, people are free to do that, but they can do that on their own devices.
Dr. Stange, sorry there. Just to take on from what you were saying about families wanting to send barrels. It has been said recently that the St. Vincent and Grenadines government has announced recently that they're implementing like a public health act on the importation of canned goods into the country. Any idea why this is happening at this point?
Yeah, when you export and import things, you have to have basically this public health act that basically is enshrined, that there's an actual transparent process of actually things that are going in. Because if people are actually sending goods that, for example, if you watch on these programs and stuff, and even people that come off the plane and they're coming back from a country of origin, they have to make sure that these actual items are safe. Canned goods aren't really going to be an issue. But if someone wants to send something, like root crops or something that's dug up, could you imagine if you got an actual certain pest or something that grew, it could actually devastate and wipe out our whole actual agricultural system, because you're introducing a brand new thing into the environment. So that's what it's actually done under. And then there's a secondary strand there, is that, for example, in the shelters, the reason why the Public Health Act comes in, it's the same thing, like, for example, in Northern Ireland, is that we have certain restrictions here and we have regulations that come in because of COVID. So the Public Health Act is not an actual draconian measure that comes forth. It's basically there to protect everyone and to have a fair and proportioned and equal response to the export and import of goods, the transportation of people, and making sure that everything is distributed accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm going to ask Angela to come in here.
Yes, just to jump on something that you mentioned there about evacuees. Could you tell us just briefly then, if I can maybe roll two things in one, what are the mid to long-term plans at the moment then for evacuees, and also just really for generally St. Vincent and the Grenadines? What are the mid to long-term plans?
Well, thank you so much, Angela. One of the difficulties is that we've had to second and take over some schools, because obviously you're taking people and you're taking them into an area where we have a large population and limited space. So some schools have been taken over. So as everyone realizes, education is that, these are our actual next generation of people, and they can't lose out on their education. So with our international airport that opened a few years ago, our city airport, our municipal airport, has been decommissioned. So the medium-term strategy, again, is that it's a fluid situation, Angela. It's very difficult to say how long the volcano activity is going to go on for. But at this stage, we can actually plan that it's going to be for the foreseeable future. So the understanding is right now is what they're going to do is actually at where our airport is in Artisvale, they're going to start making and actually building schools. So then obviously the students that have been displaced can continue their education. And then the long-term goal will be is that right now, if you want to talk about, it almost breaks your heart. And like I said, the outpouring and the events and how people have come together, the amount of community kitchens that have come together in St. Vincent, and people have even come across from other parts of the world that are actually cooking 3 meals a day for people. But as everyone knows, people want to be self-sufficient. People want to make their own meals, and people appreciate it's a humanitarian thing. So the long-term goal is obviously going to have these facilities, available for people. So if this is going to last any long term, they'll have a kitchen and stuff on place, so people will be able to prepare their own meals. But again, there's kind of two things happening here, is that because we've taken over the schools, we can't be doing this for a long term. So if this goes on any longer, and it's seen it's going to be, we'll look at that. This is actually being compared to the 1902 eruption, which actually went on for, I think it was 7 to 8 months, if I look back in history. So, again, if it's a long-term thing, we have to start making these provisions and doing that. And it's not, we'll have to have, the shelter and stuff is okay. But again, we also have, during COVID, we have to social distance. We have to look at all these things and make sure it's happy. But that's really where we're going with things. So it is a fluid situation. No one has all the answers, but again, it's being looked at. We're looking at the experts. We're looking at all the science. We're looking at the medical professionals and giving their advice back. And again, the government will plan accordingly for that.
Okay. We have very little time left.
That's right. Yes.
I know Yolande had something she wanted to ask with regards to the people.
I mean, I suppose Chris has probably alluded to the response. Initially, I remember in the discussion we've had with Dr. Smith, there was a mention of potentially looking at the international community to possibly make avenues for people who are displaced to leave St. Vincent, and that could probably be for them to make laws for making it easier for people to join family members that live in international communities. But you mentioned that even with the regional countries opening the doors, only 700 people have more or less registered to leave, other than national pride. Chris, do you know any reason why the take-up is so low? Is there any comments in that regard?
Well, I'll tell you right now, actually, the OECS countries have actually been very, and have opened their doors. So, for example, certain countries have said they'll take X amount of people. And again, this is one thing that I want to actually hit, because in the media, this has been wrongly reported. Getting vaccinated and even getting a COVID test, it's the same situation as it is here in the Northern Ireland in the UK. It's not mandatory, it's voluntary. Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to straighten that one more time, because what's been reported in the thing is that the government is forcing people to do this and to do that. No, that's not the case at all.
You mean a vaccine is not mandatory to leave the country?
No, it is not.
Right.
So, for example, each country has made its own arrangement with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So they're all exactly the same. So if I was to break that down, so for example, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Dominica, Trinidad, Grenada, all our actual regional countries are willing to accept a certain amount of nationals. And this is what the prerequisite is. They have to have a COVID test before they actually leave, because you need to know the status of that person, okay? Secondly, when they actually arrive in the new country, they have to have a COVID test again. Again, you need to prove the actual status of this person. And then depending on that, there will be some type of mandatory quarantine. There will also be a medical team when you arrive there, because you need to actually take your health records with you from St. Vincent. So for example, if you land in St. Lucia and you're diabetic, there's going to be the actual provision for you to get your medication in St. Lucia, isn't there? So you'll need to have your health record. But again, with regards to, and again, if you've had your first jab of your vaccination, that country will actually honor you to have your second jab if that's required. But it's not mandatory. That's not forced upon people. So again, everyone is actually opening up their doors. But what's happening in St. Vincent is that people don't want to leave the country. I think some nationals are happy to go and visit family and friends in these neighboring countries for short term, but they want to get back to St. Vincent. They want to be involved in the recovery process. And a lot of them want to get back to their own homes, because a lot of their homes, a lot of people are they're kind of dodging the law, and we don't want them to go back into the red zone or the orange zone. But a lot of these people, because of the ash accumulation, they want to clear their roofs and their property because of that extra weight. It's actually collapsing properties. So they want to keep things going. And the government has done everything it can. It has actually a policing done, and we have police forces from all our neighboring countries that have come to help with this, to make sure that people's homes and everything are safe, that they're not being looted, etc. So every provision has actually been made. But again, just a lot of people are not uptaking that. When you looked at all the evacuees, most of the evacuees that left on the cruise ships, those were nationals from the UK, from Canada, from America, and they were all taken to St. Martin to actually have an ongoing flight accordingly outwards.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for clarifying that. And for those who don't know, sorry, just before you.
Home is home, so
Home
you
is
can
where the
see
heart is.
it's hard to just.
That's right. And for those who don't know, the OECS stands for the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Am I right?
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for coming on and for answering our questions, clarifying so much. We have such a clear picture now of what's taking place that I just hope everybody who's been listening and watching have, been moved to help with this humanitarian crisis that we are talking about, and that people will really get behind it and donate, especially in cash, as Dr. Stange has pointed out, so that the help can happen immediately and can happen in the places where they're needed most. Thank you once again, Dr. Stange. Is there anything that you would like to raise the volume on in 20 seconds?
Yes. So the last thing is that right now there's been a lot of funding and international assistance that's coming in. But again, right now it's just in humanitarian mode. So what I would ask, through this format and podcast, is to keep this actual issue live. This is an ongoing thing. And again, although news channels move on to other things, I think we have a responsibility for our community to keep this highlighted. Because again, once the humanitarian side is done, the post-recovery, we're estimating it's going to be in the hundreds of millions of pounds. The agriculture is gone, fisheries are gone, forestry is gone. We have to do an impact assessment, but that's going to be the big, big cost.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone for listening and watching. Thank you, Dr. Stange. Shall we all say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.